Welcome to the Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy, the free podcast for motivated teachers and school leaders who want to inspire their students and school community in literacy learning. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast player, and for more amazing literacy resources, check out the show notes provided with every episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon and I'm the host of A Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs. And welcome, Phil.
Thanks, Sharon, and welcome back to part 2 of our podcast. Enjoy.
So, we're starting this writing unit. So, let's say it's Beck with her fantasy narrative that they're writing. Their first planning day, they only have a day for the planning because they've already been thinking about fantasy for 3 or 4 weeks before that, and they know they're going to be writing their own. So by the time they get to that planning day,
they're well ready.
They are up and away. They're going, oh, this is what mine's going to be about. Here's the features. And so the planning then comes down to, right, these are the features of fantasy text. So I need to choose my characters. I need to choose what fantasy characters, because they're not real characters in fantasy. They're, so they've already got these elements in mind. So the planning day is actually quite swift and it just actually doesn't need any more than that. Then, well, what do we lead on to from there? Drafting, revising starts straight away, and a cycle of drafting, revising goes for a number of days in a row.
And a teacher modelling that drafting and revising?
Teacher modelling, particularly modelling 2 things. So modelling being intentional about crafting. So which out of the writing traits elements are we focusing on based on what I've noticed from my student that I want my students to improve in? And am I modelling what I'm thinking about as I'm drafting, or am I modelling what I'm doing to revise?
Great. Yep.
Do you see
Yep.
I'm not always modelling a drafting process, and neither am I always modelling a revising process.
Both are important to learn about and see a teacher model it. Yeah.
Yes. So whilst they've got their piece on the go, I've got my piece on the go.
Yep.
And I've got, and I haven't said this at all, and Alan Wright, he says this often and frequently. We've had Alan on the podcast talking about writing, and there's another powerful voice to listen to. But teachers need to be writing as well. We can't just expect our children to be writing. If I'm expecting my children to be writing in a particular type of text, I have to know how that works. Not because a script tells me how it works, but because I, as a writer, knows how it works so that I can model better. But I should also have an extraordinary mentor text with me, for the class, because that's an even better writer whose company we are sitting with.
Shall we talk about how to choose one of those?
We can. I don't feel like I've even answered that second question.
Well, we haven't got all day.
No. Do you know what?
You've had a good
what
batch
I haven't done, but do you know what I haven't done that I would like to just talk about before we get to the mentor text is, so these units that I'm even talking about, what are the elements of them?
Okay, that's a good idea.
So in each of the units, I'm actually talking about them working within. So you've heard me talk about the writing traits being an important element of them. The writing process is an important element, and the mentor text and modelling are important elements. So those 4, they kind of frame
The writing
the
unit.
writing unit. So in each unit, I'm calling it a reading workshop and a writing workshop. So that within the reading workshop, so if we go back to Beck, who's doing the read aloud, she's not doing that in the writer's workshop. She's doing her read aloud in reader's workshop, and she's letting her children listen in to features of and to notice.
So this is where we're linking reading and writing, isn't it?
Yes.
And that's a powerful thing to do.
And I haven't even said that. Thank you for making that connection, because we can only write as well as the literature we are surrounded by, and that literature can't be static. We have to be engaging with it. And to engage with it, it means a teacher reading it aloud is one of the optimum ways of helping us understand how those texts work.
So Beck does that pre-work in the reading workshop and gets that mentor text being used within that reading workshop.
Yes.
And mindfully doing that, because it's then leading on to what's going to happen in the writing workshop.
Yes, yeah. Now, that doesn't mean that for every unit you need to front load like that.
Okay.
So let's say we're doing a poetry unit. I should have poetry on the go frequently. But if I'm doing a poetry unit, I might only start with, looking at poetry at that time, because that's a much quicker turnaround. We can look at a poem and we can use that as a model and innovate and experiment with that form or that poem right there and then.
And a little plug for Teachific. We've got a really good section of poetry on Teachific.
Yes.
That people can go to and see lots of subcategories of poetry.
Yeah.
Yep.
We've got a great list of poetry anthologies on there, so because we also want these texts in children's hands. And not that Beck is the only teacher in the world doing this, but, she would also have fantasy books available in the class for children to be reading for themselves. So it's not just about read aloud, it's about leading children into that genre of text as well, which the Australian curriculum asks of us, that our students need to explore a breadth of reading.
So the writing,
that reading-writing link
is really important.
Yeah.
So the writing unit has got the reading workshop, the writing workshop.
Yeah.
But it's supporting teachers in those 4 aspects that you were talking about: the writing process,
the writing traits, the structure, so different types of texts.
Yep.
Right, so different genres, different text types, and then, the modelling and the literature, the mentor texts.
Okay.
They're 4 big important things. So I do, for each unit, give some possible mentor texts that can be used.
Right.
Now, because we're Australian, I have made those quite Australian-centric. It's not only Australian, but our curriculum does also ask of us that our students are engaging with contemporary and classic texts from Australia and internationally, and with our First Nations focus as well, and Asia. So I'm mindful of those things when I provide for every unit. I have a mentor texts list. It might look small, might only be 5 or 6 on there. Oh, and the other thing that I haven't said here is I'm doing these for every year level. Yes. So it's not just that I've done 4 units, a narrative, an imaginative. This is for every year level. I've done at least 4 units, that I think sustain a 5 to 6 week focus. But as you say, within that structure.
Yeah. So this is what comprises the unit.
Yes.
We've covered all the aspects.
Plus I do make a little mention of assessment and how we might assess that. So assessment for, as and of learning.
Yep.
So incorporating, using, conferring and looking at student spelling in the writing, or using a writing rubric, whether it be the 6+1 traits. I highly recommend that for the crafting side of things, and also add in key vocabulary.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. The big piece, of course, is that there are a number of possible mini lessons.
Well, that is the big piece, isn't it?
Yeah. And every one of those mini lessons starts with good writers. So I've got a year 1 unit here on personal narratives. Good writers draw a picture or a series of pictures and tell or write about them. So...
Well, that's an action that can be modelled by the teacher.
Yes.
Yep.
And just a short model. We're still talking mini lessons. We're not talking about the teacher doing the whole thing and children never getting to do for themselves. I think that's one thing that I probably haven't made so clear, is that we can't be modelling for 4 weeks and then get the children writing.
No. Now, with these mini lessons, how do the teachers best choose them?
Based on what they notice about their students.
That's what I was...
So the order and the...
It's not in the order that's there.
No.
It's in the order of what you notice in the classroom.
Yes.
Yep.
And this is some feedback on the units that we've had. Whilst it's not a script, and sometimes I go, look, I'm not sure if there is enough here, to sustain you for all of this. But every bit of feedback I have had about it is, oh my goodness, now I know where to start.
Fantastic.
That it's not just that it's a whole lot of stuff dumped on here. It is intentional, what is here, but it is not restrictive. It's not saying, all right, this unit you are going to concentrate on verbs, on the strong verbs. You would choose those things. You need to have a few things sitting in front of you, especially what children are doing and what you're noticing, so that you know, all right, let me model, let's just say that one, draw a picture or a series of pictures and tell or write about them. If I'm telling a story of something that's happened to me and the sequence of that. So I'd start modelling that and then I set them off to do that.
Yep.
And I don't draw a picture or a series of pictures. I'm not going to sit there and draw my whole series of pictures. This is another really important thing I want to say about writing, actually, is that when we model, it's frequently best to model a little bit and let our students go and do that bit, and then let's come back and reflect on that. After not too long, maybe 10 minutes, our older writers might want to go for a bit longer than that, but I have found it entirely powerful, and teachers have said, this just makes such a difference. And I'll give an example from Rick and Jenna's class where they were working on procedures. They wanted to model, so they had their title, then they had their, the materials you need, and then here's our process and, diagrams to go in there. I said, just model one part at a time, which they then did. And they said, game changer, because our children can't remember all of that.
So they see that short modelling and then they go and practice that on a short piece of writing.
Yes.
Could be quick writing. And then they come back again, another model. But
reflect on it to go, here's my title. This is, great title for this. And someone else will go, actually, my title, I don't think it's clear enough. So let me just change that.
And we're all learning from each other.
Yes. And then the materials I needed. Let me see. Have I got what I needed? Oh, do you know what I've forgotten? And it's, it's this active reflecting and thinking about it rather than the teacher going, well, you've forgotten this, you've forgotten that. Where's this? Where's that? It's this opportunity to just slow down, but to do it for ourselves and go, I've done that part so successfully now. I am well set now to do the next part.
It's a bit like having a short cycle on the revising bit as well, isn't it?
Well, this is actually the exact same thing. This is drafting, revising, drafting, revising.
Yep.
It's exactly that.
Yep.
So rather than writing the whole procedure, go off and write your procedure, and now, you didn't have this material listed and so therefore it's not shown up in your steps. Well, wouldn't have it been good if we'd have drafted and revised, the materials section first before we went on to do the next part?
It's really
We're kind of setting our kids up to fail.
This is really ramping up the teaching and learning, isn't it? Like you've really got lots more opportunities to teach.
Yes.
And lots more to share.
Yes.
And to learn.
Yes.
Yep.
And the on-the-spot teaching
it's powerful.
is, I actually don't need to, teachers find there is less interrupting. When you walk and you'll remember this, from in the classroom, Phil, where you walk around and you go, oh my gosh, I'm seeing so many things that need to be addressed here. Now I can't, where do I even begin with that? But this is, if what's to be done is title and the materials needed, that's all we're focusing on. And what about, materials needed? Well, if we're writing about something that we've all done together, well, there's some key words that should be up on the word wall.
Yeah.
So I'm using them, I'm spelling them correctly.
And they can use those key words in their writing.
Yes. So it's not just about copying, but it is about I should be able to check, have I spelt them correctly?
Or which ones haven't I used?
Yes, or which things... and so it's not just that it's, okay, there's the list and I now copy it. It's not that at all. But it is about thinking, right, for what I did, what were the materials that were required? And a key word might be materials. Might not be anything else other than materials, because that's what has to be listed there. That's why vocabulary is part of that list. What are the key words that we would need to be using?
Right, so we've got this powerful unit, super powerful.
Yes.
Supportive.
Yes.
And one of the questions I had was about choosing mentor text.
Yes.
Sharon, can you talk a bit about that?
All right, so mentor text. I guess the easiest thing for me to kind of reflect on is, how did I choose the text that I did to put on the lists even for mentor texts?
Good point.
And that was about looking at, for the age of the student, so because I've done these units for the year level, what is, number one, what is available, and what do I think teachers will find readily available, and what features, what excellent features is that text bringing? So if we're thinking about writing traits, so are we seeing good examples of, ideas, organisation, voice, word choice, sentence structure, conventions, presentation? I'm looking at all of those things going, oh yeah, this book's got that in spades.
Because when we talked earlier, we talked about any book having these things.
Yes, but I did say even then, I said any high quality book will have all of those things.
Right.
You will know when you pick up a book and you'll go, oh my goodness, just look at this, and can I imagine my students being inspired by this like I am? Because it should inspire. If it doesn't inspire, a child or you are not going to be thinking, oh, I would love to write like that, or I would love to create that. Now, Sean, who had year 1-2 last year, used the Pete Cromer series of books. One is called Wildlife, one is called Bird Life. Don't know what the other two are because I haven't got them sitting in front of me. His children, his year 1s, 2s, were so inspired. In fact, Sean was inspired because I showed this book at a workshop. Now, there are probably about 20-something creatures in this book. Now, he used these as read-alouds and children finding out all of this information about lots of animals and then finding out more as they were reading about and exploring about. each week his children wrote about an animal. They created each week. They had their page. He said he didn't need to tell them, okay, you need the title and then you need your sentences. They were just using this as a mentor text to go, this is what I need. Right, I want to have location and I want to find out the scientific name and I want to find out what the name of the baby is called or the young of that is called. And they did a full page. He actually did A3 art pieces for each animal. Now, in a 5-week unit, they all created at least 4. Some children created more.
Fantastic.
And what did they do with those? Well, Sean will be quite honest, he put them up in the room for a while because he said, their collages were so spectacular. Well, not all of them were up there, but a lot of them. But that became a book. Every child had a book. Now, what other features did that book have? Table of contents. So now I'm starting to add in all of these other non-fiction features. Does this book have a table of contents? No. But they know about table of contents, then that's a feature that they can put in.
Being inspired by the book, and it's also noticing the features that are being shown in the book.
Yeah.
So that's a couple of key things on choosing a mentor text.
Yes. So Kate at another school, as the literacy facilitator, she does the same thing when she's purchasing mentor texts for, across the school, because not every teacher has time to always go and choose the mentor text. She does the exact same thing. Really researches, really looks through, okay, what's the historical fiction available here to this year level and to this age range? Is there a picture book? Is there a longer text? What are the things that I'm available? And let me make a collection of those things, because I'm just talking about one book being used as the mentor text. There doesn't have to just be one book, because we also want our students to engage with that genre with a number of books. But sometimes the very formatting of it can be such an inspiration to children, just like the, Sammy Bailey and the illustrated encyclopedia books. For non-fiction, finding a book that's got a great layout and really presents information with lots of informational text features is actually what we're after and what the curriculum expects of us. Because it says we should be using table of contents, index, diagrams, maps, timelines, charts, graphs, all of those things. So we want to be able to find text that, for anything, for historical fiction, well, what are the features that we need in that? And that might be in a diary format. So we want texts that show us, which showcase, getting right back to where we began, Phil, but to showcase the wonderful choosing and using of language and voice and sentences and the ways we can present things, all of those wonderful crafts of writers. We want to know how we can do that too, and find books that can lead us into going, oh, look at what we could do.
Fantastic. Look, I think we've got so many more questions for you, and not sure we're going to cover them all, but we'll probably cover the next few of them. What are some great units to do at each year level? I think you kind of talked about that.
Yes, yeah. So, and look at that mud map, because that actually gives a really good example of across, certainly from foundation to year 6, across the years, what kinds of units should we be looking at?
That's good.
And even down to the differences in poetry, so that it wouldn't be the same type of poetry year upon year upon year. Just like with narrative, I think I've got in maybe year 1, like a cumulative story rather than just a
couple of great
blah, blah
podcasts
story.
On poetry by Alan Wright and Paul Kelly.
Yes.
Now, what about some great publishing ideas?
Oh, right. Do you know what? As much as possible, into books. make books.
Yep.
And we've already talked about this briefly, but in reference to Sean, but if we're doing bits along the way, we can publish along the way so that we don't have to leave all of the publishing to the very end.
Yes, it's speeding up the cycle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not speeding it up, it's making it more frequent.
Yes.
The cycle.
So say, for example, let's talk about Rick and Jenna and their procedures that they were doing. And what they did do was they did 3 procedures over 5 weeks. And so they didn't write 3 procedures and then revise and publish. For 3 weeks in a row, they got kids engaged in lots of different procedures, and then they drafted and revised, as we talked about before, and published. And then the next week, drafted, revised, published, drafted, revised, published in the next week. So
it's more frequent, but it's cumulative. It's adding to the longer piece.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's the key.
Yes.
It's a really...
Even for informational writing, let's say we are doing, different elements of, for any informational piece. All right, let's write our introduction. Let's publish that.
Mm.
What graphic is going with that? What's our next thing that we're going to do? All right, let's draft it. Let's revise it. Let's publish it. And then there's our next page. What's the next bit we're going to do? Let's draft, revise, publish that. So how does that work with story? Well, actually, it works in that we can be, in our drafting and revising. And, oh, my gosh, I think I just want to do a podcast on revision one day because there are so many tremendous strategies. And just a quick tip about that, this drafting and revising that you do, if we're working on paper, if we're working in books, apart from foundation and year 1, who really our draft is our good copy, and we may make some revision to that draft, but it's still our good copy. We're not necessarily rewriting that whole piece.
No.
But same thing, we did a page for our book. The next couple of days, I've done another page. Let me get all of that together, put it together so that it isn't this long, protracted, I can't remember what I did back there and now that didn't work. And so this really speeding along. So publishing where we can, page upon page upon page is, I just remembered my thought about if I'm drafting and revising, get your children writing on the right-hand side of their book and keep the left-hand side for their revising. And, I've crossed something out on my page and then I've got an arrow going to the left-hand page with what I want to add in, or, make that the working page, or this whole paragraph didn't work. I just want to give that another go. I'll do it over here on the left.
Great
so
idea.
That is, and if they are typing up their drafts, print it out and do the revisions on paper. Works much better. You can cut, you can paste, you can do that thing of putting things on the... It's actually much less unwieldy than trying to revise, just on the computer. All right, sorry. So publishing ideas, getting it into books, modelling it on mentor texts can be another really great publishing idea. So if, like that wildlife book, I want my book to look like that book. So being inspired by the presentation of something to say, I want my presentation looking like that. Yeah. But books, I'll say that 90% of the time, publish it as a book. And why is that so important? Number 1, I have got a physical and tangible something in my hand that I can now share with others, and copies can actually be made of that to be within our own collection of books in the classroom. Like, these should be being read by others.
And there's the link back to reading.
And there's the link back to reading, what we write. And that is actually why we write, so others can read. So,
and that's why we spell.
Yes, but this idea of publishing is the key to this. And yes, a PowerPoint is a form of publishing, but nobody sees it again. Nobody sees it again. So, we want to get things so they can be read.
And reflecting back on what we've written is a whole powerful part of the learning, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
So one of our last questions, Sharon, is how do we make the writing units joyful?
Right. Here's some tips.
Right.
Just don't concentrate on structure only.
Right.
If we're thinking narrative or we're thinking any type of text structure and we think, okay, this is the structure of it, it's not going to get us great writing.
Start with purpose.
Start with purpose and start with a mentor text.
Yep.
Really understand what exceptional writing looks like, in that if they're seeing low-level examples of it, it's going to be low-level output. Frank Smith said, we learn from the company we keep. We absolutely need incredible examples of what writers choose and use to do, and the writing outcome is entirely different when we bring those types of texts to our students.
So that certainly makes it more joyful. Any other tips on joyfulity?
I love that new word. Tricky, but so the mentor texts is definitely, I think, one of the biggest ways of letting our students know how joyful writing can be. If we concentrate on structure, I just think that's so boring. Yep. And so do kids.
Yep.
But if we open the world into what it can be, how joyful, what this can look like,
well, those writers
what this can sound like.
The writers in those books are making it joyful.
Yes.
So we've got to pick up on that joy.
We absolutely do. And we want to let our students be able to look at any book then. So by doing that, allowing our students and enabling our students to be able to look at books and go, oh my gosh, that's what I could do. That's what I could do. And therefore, authors are our best and strongest ally in the writing classroom, like top quality literature. And in that way, do you know what? We're kind of getting out of kids' way by saying, all right, let me bring in and let me expose you to the breadth and wealth. And the curriculum asks this of us, to really bring in and expose our students to such a huge range of texts that they can be learning not just from the content of that as readers and learn about their world and themselves and others through the reading, but learning how texts work.
And on that note, I think we might close our session, Sharon. It's been really fantastic. And I'm sure there's other questions we could ask and go for another hour. But
yes, I did notice that you did have a few more questions typed up at the end of our little notes here.
Yes, but I think we can leave those for another day, and we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah, and in fact, as I scan over those questions, I think there's, some of the stories from the classroom. Yep. We've shared some of those. It is alive. It is happening. There are, I get a lot of photos and messages from teachers giving me a glimpse into if I haven't been at the school for a little while, with schools that I'm working with, getting to see what their students are doing and what they're creating, what they've written, what they're publishing, and therefore what they can share with a wider audience is pretty darn exciting.
Yeah. In the show notes, there'll be a link to the writing units plus all the other things we mentioned.
Yes. And there are quite a few that wrap around all of this.
Yep.
So this is really just another piece to the puzzle. Well, not the puzzle, but another piece to where I've been trying to go with that. We had that mud map, of the different text types. These units are starting to fill in a little bit more detail about those things. And I really hope there's some joy in some of those units for people, to go, there's some texts that, as I said, I might not have listed many, but I've tried to list the best quality of what I've been able to find and that I've used around those things. So it's not to the exclusion of other things. I'd love it if, it's always about, what everyone else can add to that. But I hope there's something that nourishes you in just giving you a little bit more support and some
direction.
Thank you, Phil, because I'm not doing very well here at thinking about, some support, some direction, and some joy in saying, in thinking outside of structure and thinking more about the being a writer.
Being a writer, really important. But I think that whole thing of, as we said right at the beginning, that struggle of being narrowly focused on what NAPLAN is requiring of us. But we can take it way beyond that with the support of mentor texts and these writing units. Now, just a little plug for Teachific.
Oh, yes.
The writing units, if you're a member, you've got entire free access to all those resources, all those writing units.
Yep.
And
every one
when
of them.
you download them, they stay on your dashboard for you to use at any time. So just a plug there.
Yes. And one thing I didn't mention, that the writing, for every year level, there will be a writing unit that is an author study unit. And without exception...
They've been successful, haven't they?
Oh, my goodness. From every teacher, every child saying, we just so loved not only finding out about that author, but being able to learn about that author's, noticing that author's way of being as a writer and trying that out for myself and coming to, and for some of the older students to really say, and to finding myself as a writer. That's pretty powerful.
Getting into the shoes of the writer and then finding out about yourself as a writer as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for being with us today, and hope you've got a lot out of that session. And thank you, Sharon.
Always a pleasure. And yes, love talking about writing.
Adios.
Okay, thanks, everybody. All the best.
Bye.
Catch you next time. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.